Again, just shoulders back, sternum up just a little bit. Couple releasing breaths, giving yourself full presence inside the room. If something's like really present for you right now, either in your thoughts or in your feelings, your thoughts or your emotions, just promise yourself that you'll go back and deal with it when the time's appropriate, and that right now it's probably not helpful to hang on to it. So again, it's not like you're suppressing. Just promise yourself, okay, I'm going to go back and deal with this when I have time, but I need to just kind of let myself free of it for a little while. Be able to start the conversation about, so what do you do when it's not working? I mean, we're talking about, again, your physiological imprint creates your reality, which creates your physiological imprint, which creates your reality. And so far, we've learned all about how that happens, and we've begun to really learn how you begin to switch it up, with the background that it's every moment that adds up. It's not the big things, it's the every moment. And so how do we begin to switch up all of those moments so we spend more of our time in life generating states? And again, it's not about suppressing, it's not about denying, it's not about pretending. It's not about pretending, because your body knows the truth, because it's more connected to that part of your brain that's beyond your awareness. Again, I don't like the word subconscious, because it's a good thing that there's a lot of our brain that's beyond awareness. It just kind of it's like automatic pilot. But sometimes the automatic pilot needs to go back and be reprogrammed, like those planes that have just been crashing lately. Some pretty bad programming going on there. So all of your brain can be reprogrammed, and what we're talking about now is how do you go and start to reprogram that automatic pilot. So we've talked about ways to do it in every day, 3-to-1 ratio, micro moments, attention to attention, cementing the good. We've talked now about some tools where you're automatically, intentionally trying to create and engage your calm and connection system. One of the ones that we talked about way back was attitude breathing, or in the book is called heartful breathing, where when you're in a place, say you're nervous about taking a test, and instead of getting caught up in that nervousness, okay, I'm just going to breathe calm. I'm just going to breathe calm. Because that switch in your physiology, the switch in your thoughts, begins to change your state, so you really do become more calm. The one that I gave you on Monday was heart in the moment, and I had you write a list of images. And the steps, again, for all the heart tools are notice, refocus, nurture. Notice is disengage. Just notice when you're being reactive and disengage. Refocus your physiology, because again, your physiology determines your emotion, and then intentionally engage in a different emotional state. So I had you write your list of images, and it doesn't have to be off of that list. But the idea there of the third step is, instead of just calming yourself down like present moment awareness or power of pause, it's intentionally taking another step. Because remember, you are your synapses, and I'm going to revisit that a little bit today. You are your thought patterns. But it's not about the thought patterns where you're trying to think positive and you really don't believe it. You are your authentic thought patterns. So how do we begin to switch those up? So again, it's like, hopefully over the whole semester, you're just building a bigger and bigger and bigger toolbox. Because I can't impress enough, it's not just about the moment. It's about what you're creating in the long term. We see functional changes in our brain and our whole body, actually, which means the moment-to-moment changes. But we also see structural changes in your brain. That's pretty big. You actually change your brain structure by intentionally being different. And again, it doesn't work if you're suppressing, it doesn't work if you're denying, it doesn't work if you're thinking positive and you really don't believe it. It doesn't work if you're blaming and shaming yourself for being reactive. It has to be an authentic shift. So today we're going to start a kind of a harder, deeper conversation about what happens when it's not working. You've done the power of pause, you've done present moment awareness, you've even tried heart in the moment, and no matter what you do, there's still something coming up. And you're carrying it a lot. It may be a reactivity that comes up a lot for you, and you would be a lot better off without that routine reactivity. It could be a major thing that you're carrying and carrying and carrying and can't let go, and don't realize why you can't let go. And the more you try to suppress it, it's like a buoy, right? You know, trying to push a buoy underwater. Is it going to stay down? No, it's just going to keep popping back up. So what do we do then? What do we do when something below the chart starts to come up for us? So I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story, and I'm just kind of intersperse her story through this because it's a good representation. And again, if I ever tell stories in classes that's not either about me or my kid, well, my kids give me permission to, then it's somebody that's already given me permission to tell stories, because sometimes I include those stories in the books that I write. So Kendra was a young woman, and her mother wasn't present in her life, and her father or her grandmother was really her primary caretaker, and had been her primary caretaker for most of her life. And so now Kendra's older, she's in college, and her grandmother's getting older and she's getting sick, and she wants Kendra to come by and take care of her. And she can't do it. Kendra can't do it. She's angry that her grandmother would be asking her for this. She's really reactive. Then she's got the part of herself that hates herself because she can't do that for this woman that's been here for her most of her life. She's got all these complicated emotions around all of this stuff. She hates herself. She's mad at the demands from her grandmother. She thinks she's overwhelmed with school. She's overwhelmed with all the other stuff going on in her life. And she's got all these really complicated emotions around all of this stuff. So what do you do then? You know, she comes to school and she's trying to focus, but she's got this recurring thing coming up of either shame around it all, or, you know, frustration, anger, and she knows that the frustration and anger is probably way out of context for the situation. And I want you to just think right now, just kind of think about you and your own life. I know this is a really singular example, but the truth is we all have those situations in our life where somebody is maybe asking something from us, or somebody is expecting something from us, and we're really reactive around it. And we think that the reactivity may be warranted or not warranted, but we really don't understand why we're. So I'm going to kind of talk about her process and how she worked through this as we went along. So again, what we're talking about now is, so what do you do with the bottom of the chart? Because again, it's not just about pretending the bottom of the chart doesn't exist. So remember again, if you have that, I'm going to give you just a minute, and if you have that chart, get out the chart. What do you do with the bottom of that chart? Now the thing is a lot of different programs or traditions of thought will tell you that the top is positive and the bottom is negative. And I purposely don't use the terms positive and negative for that reason, or good and bad, or the bottom of the chart is something that we need to suppress, or the bottom of the chart or some traditions call afflictive emotions. Those are the bad things. And what I'm trying to invite you into, and this is a much deeper conversation, that maybe those things aren't the bad things. Maybe number one, they're understandable, and number two, for healing, because number three, there's something that has kind of been programmed into us. But the way to heal them isn't to pretend you don't have them, and it's not to suppress them. It's not to judge them, and it's not to judge yourself for having them. Because guess what? All those states just bring you below the line again. Now, having said that, there is a truth that if you are totally consumed by those emotions all the time with unrelenting, that those become your way of being. Again, it is true that you are a system of adaptation, but it's not helpful to pretend those things don't exist. It's not helpful to pretend that or judge them for being bad. So we're going to talk about how you hold both of those, because both are true. It is true that if you exist in those emotional states below the line more often than not, then that becomes your way of being. Again, and this isn't a value judgment. It's not anything. It's just the truth of our science is you adapt to what you are, or you adapt to your experience. So if that's your experience, more than not, that's what you're going to adapt to. And again, there's no value judgment in that. That's just scientific reality of how adaptation works. So again, what do I always say? Shift when you can, heal when you can't. Because sometimes we can't. Like for Kendra, that was coming up so strong in her, she needed to figure it out. Because she was really angry. She was angry with herself, she was resentful, she was totally overwhelmed. And again, I know that's a singular example, but you all have some kind of examples of the way those things play out for you in your life. So shift when you can, heal when you can't. What does that mean? When you can go above the line, but it's got to be authentic. It has to be authentic. Again, sometimes I can be walking to class, and I can be just as easily thinking about all the things that are going wrong, will go wrong, as the things that are going right. As noticing the things that are going right. Or noticing the hawk that was flying over me this morning as I was walking. It was beautiful. Right? But sometimes, and again, that's why the 3-to-1 ratio can be so helpful, because nobody expects you to be there all the time. And sometimes honesty about what's going on when something below the line comes up is absolutely necessary. And again, that's why I don't term them as positive and negative. I'm very careful about not doing that. So again, shift when you can, heal when you can't. When you can, and again, I know all your words are different. These are just examples. There are no right and wrong. Shift when you can, heal when you can't. When something is coming up below the line, it's not about suppressing, it's not about denying, and it's not about judging those emotions or judging yourself. But it's also not about taking off with them or staying in those states way too long than what's helpful. And again, I'm not saying don't ever be in those states. I'm not saying that at all. Sometimes you just need to be sad, or sometimes you just need to be angry. Sometimes you just need to work through grief, and that's okay. Just understanding the science of where you are more often than not creates the capacity for more of the same. Takes the value judgment away from it. Okay, so I want to go back a little bit and talk about why I think, not I just think, but my argument about why the bottom isn't bad. So I'm going to go back and just remind you a little of the brain science. Remember, you have this little deep thing in your brain called your amygdala that records every experience you've ever had, right? So that's how you get programmed to judge what is threat, what is fear. Remember, we're just talking stress as emotional disequilibrium. When you feel good, you got a lot of equilibrium going on. When you feel bad, you're knocked off of that equilibrium. That's what stress is. It's a really global term. So how we perceive what stress is is determined by things that are throwing us off balance, which is all determined by our programming. It's all determined by our programming. That's why one person can perceive something as stressful and somebody else perceives something totally different as stressful. It's all determined by your programming. And all that programming takes place in the deepest parts of your brain. So stay with me on this, because I'm coming back to the chart. So then, not only do you see your whole world and you perceive your whole world, you make judgments, you make meaning. The way you make meaning of the world you see is because it's filtered through the world of experience that you have recorded in your brain. And it's just neural wiring. I know that sounds kind of blandly scientific, but it's true. All the events of your life are over. It's just neural wiring. The problem is the second piece of that is a lot of people will say, okay, the event's over, just get over it and move on. And you can't. It's neural wiring. It's wired in your brain. And that's the programming that you make sense of your whole world from. Right? So, and so the meaning that you make is really important. It's not about pretending it's not there. It's about rewiring a new paradigm, and I'll talk about that a little bit more as we go further into it. But, so you have a perception, and again, we've gone over this and over this, but that BRC right there are behaviors and reactions and choices. So at any given point in this spiral, what you're perceiving in your life, the meaning you're making, the physiological imprint that's reflecting your emotional state, it doesn't matter where you are in the spiral, you're having behaviors and reactions and choices that are consistent with what's going on with that spiral. Okay, so stay with me, because this becomes kind of important here. So you're wired to perceive meaning, and then from that wiring, you're exhibiting behaviors and reactions and choices, and those behaviors and reactions and choices might be just to feel depressed. It might be to feel numb. It might be to get angry. Let's look at some of the words below the chart. And again, I know that yours are all different. If you have your chart, look at your chart. So I would argue that everything that you wrote below the line on the chart is either a result from some past hard experience that you have had, or a behavior, reaction, and choice that you've adopted to negotiate that experience. And why I say negotiate that experience is, I mean, okay, numbness, right? After my son's accident with the helicopter and all that stuff, he was numb. The numb was a reaction because the numbness was protecting the scared part, right? So I would argue that everything below the line is either from, from the experience directly, or it's some behavior, reaction, and choice that you've adopted to try to negotiate that experience. And again, that experience may not even be a cognitive experience. It's just something that we've been programmed. So we've been programmed, or we've been programmed to believe that people don't like us, or we've been programmed to believe that you don't belong, or you've been programmed to believe that people are judging you, or you've been programmed to believe that, your parents don't think you're good enough, or you're never going to be smart enough, or whatever it is. Again, I would argue that it's either the original experience or it's your programming from that, the behaviors, reactions, and choices. Usually what happens when we're reactive and something below the line comes up is we think that's not okay. So we try to suppress it. And guess what? Suppressing doesn't work because, again, 80%, some people even say 90% of what happens in your brain is beyond your awareness. So if the part of your brain that's aware is just trying to suppress something, it's not going to work. It's still going to be there and it's still going to be doing what it does. The only way to change it is to really go to the source and change it. Okay, so why suppress it?